Good evening, everybody. I just thought I'd come on and chat. We're getting ready to have a storm here. How's everybody doing today? And I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about what it was like as a kid on a farm, the UFC fighting thing that's supposed to be taking place on the 250th birthday party, and how to make your channel grow, and what it takes to become a successful YouTuber. So I guess we'll start out with how to be. I think when everybody gets on YouTube, you get a rush because it's like, oh my gosh, I can expand my voice. People are listening to me. Your channel's growing a bit. And it's great. It's a good feeling. But then you get so far and it's like, my channel's not growing the way it was. And then that's when it starts to become work. And by work, I mean you have to be on several different platforms. Discord, TikTok, YouTube. And you have to be providing content for those platforms all the time. See, 10 years ago, you could go onto YouTube and just start talking, and next thing you know, you've got 10,000 subs. But that's not the way it is anymore. And YouTube is not that friendly of a place to be anymore, because people that have cannot give up the old troll bullshit have ruined it for everybody. So that's why I got to a certain point where I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this. I don't want to dedicate the time to this. I don't have the energy to do it. And I knew if I didn't, then all I was doing was to come on and hear myself talk. That was it. So this way, I can do it when I feel like it, and I don't care. And also, too, you used to be able to make money off YouTube. You cannot anymore. You have to have Venmo, PayPal, all of that set up in order to make money. You have to have somebody editing your videos, or you have to spend the time editing them yourself. And for most of us, if you got a job or a life, you're not going to sit around on YouTube all day and all night doing that. So those are some of the reasons that I stopped doing my lives, and I stopped doing I stopped having interest in it, because I figured out how everything worked, and then from that point it was like, oh, there's nothing here. There's nothing that interests me. Now, I'm not saying that other people it doesn't interest, but you take a show like Chris and Holly's, or that Chris Knippi that everybody's always ragging about. Excuse me. At one time, they had 70,000 followers. And when you have 70,000 followers, you have to have moderators watching your channel, because you cannot keep up with all the negativity that will be launched on that channel. So any YouTuber that's up there, I guarantee you their held for review box is just flooded with negative comments. Or people dox you. That's another thing that happens. And a lot of people do not like to be doxxed. I personally don't give a flying shit, and nobody has been able to dox me yet. So YouTube's like anything else. It's a hobby. You get on it, you try it, you check it out. And as you go along and you learn new things, you make decisions on, hey, do I want to do this? Now, if you, somebody like, and I'll give you an example, somebody like Drunk Dur, in her held review box, that means, what that means for you, those that don't know, is she has to, every comment that is made to her, it has to be put into it gets put into a area in her channel where she has to release it. And while she's on live, she's got several people watching to make sure, well, I'm not going to say several, a few, to watching that nobody makes a comment that they don't like. So when she comes out and say shit about somebody, there is definitely people that come into that chat room and say, stop being such a bitch to everybody. But you don't see that because the moderators get rid of it. They retract it, or it doesn't make it that far. You can also, in your held review box, in your studio, change it so certain words cannot be used on her channel. Trigger words, I guess you'd call them. And it's not just swear words, it's other words too. So for somebody like Drunk Dur's channel, beer, alcohol. So the minute somebody tries to write a comment, you drink too much. Dar could already have her setting in her studio to say the word drinking is not allowed or drink. So it's not that those comments are not coming in. They are. It's just that they don't make it because they're blocked. Now on my channel, I don't have any moderators. It's all me. Because I'm tough enough to deal with what trolls do. Actually, when they come into my channel, I make fun of them. And I don't allow people to in my channel to talk about other people in a negative way. Because what I'm doing at that point is I'm providing people in my comment section to talk shit about other people. And I'm responsible for that because it's my channel. So for instance, if somebody comes in and starts talking shit about somebody, I won't allow it. Unless under I can't talk. And I don't promote channels that are troll channels. I don't call good people good people. They're bad, they're bad. And you just don't say anything about them. That's just the easiest way to deal with it. But like, if you're doing a channel, especially these days, because social media is so flooded with it, and you're not willing to show your face, you're only going to get so far. That's the bottom line. And I know that. But I don't care. I'm happy with the people that I do have on my channel. I'm happy with the 800 and some subs I have. These people have been with me since the very beginning. So I know that they know when other people are talking shit, because they were there to see it all. So anyway, I've been watching that UFC stuff that's going on in the White House lawn. And UFC fighters are starting to come out and say, you know what, we're not going to do it. Some of them are, well, I put up a video on my post page, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. UFC fighters, like, in June, with the weather possibly reaching, 100 degrees, that is dangerous for those fighters to be in that weather fighting. That is dangerous dehydration. They cannot fight their best fight when they're trying to beat off the heat at the same time. And Donald Trump and his, I don't know what you call his occultists, or whatever they're called, they're at the point where they're sending letters to these fighters telling them they cannot fight because they're against Israel, they're Palestinian. And then of course that offends another fighter. And then there's fighters that don't want to fight because he's using it to divide up the country. And since there's virtually no entertainment, he's decided to make it a rally for himself. You guys are paying for him to promote himself for the next election. Is what's going on. So no. And the video I put on my post page is where fighters are starting to speak out. And it's going to be a absolute, for lack of a better expression, fuck up, like everything else he does. There was a interview with a woman who lives one block from the arena where the basketball game was being played in New York. She had got off work doing a 12-hour shift on her feet. And because Trump had that game so much security and so blocked off, it took her 6 hours to get home. A New York City block away. Call a cab, you couldn't get a cab through. You got so far, nope, you got to go around. President of the United States is here. He made that game miserable for the fans. And not only that, after he was booed within an inch of his life, he sat down and fell asleep. And he can't deny it because there's so much video footage of him doing it. But then, in the middle of the night, on his Truth Social, he put on there, they love him. It was wonderful. He was just honored to have such a warm reception. I'm not sure anymore whether this man is just a narcissist or batshit crazy. Like, do you think he truly believes, like when he is standing there and an entire basketball stadium is booing him, 20,000 people are booing him, do you think he hears clapping? don't know. I really do not know. He is so fucking crazy. You know, Chuck and I were talking about it, and he just out of nowhere said to me, what Donald Trump's going to do is he's going to do what Hitler did. He's going to go down in a basement somewhere and blow his head off. And I'm like, oh. And I was like, oh, that's a little extreme. But now I'm, crazy as that guy's getting, I'm kind of thinking that's possible. Something like that could happen. So brace yourself. All I know is getting rid of Donald Trump is he's not going to go quietly into the night. I'll tell you that much. It's going to be just, and I hope. Oh, and then this is another thing. He is losing Republicans are losing election after election. They just lost a red state, or Mississippi. They just lost an election down there to the Democrats. A black woman. They lost an election in Texas. And Trump is just crying and crying about what's going on in California because he wanted Spencer Pratt. It's like your entire government is reality TV stars. And the other thing you might want to take a look at is Pete Hedgewith, or Pigwith, has been kicked out of France. He's not welcome back. They're like, no more. He went there to do a speech, which is done by every president, or every year, and the speech was to honor the people of Normandy. Normandy, the storming of the beaches and all that. D-Day. And he was so vile and so disrespectful, the way he talked about the country, the way he talked about soldiers, the way he talked about military people in general. They told him, see, you wouldn't want to be you. They even put it in the damn newspapers. But on a good side, things are actually changing. That's good. Now, last night I talked about some of the things growing up on a farm and what it was like. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Because you are talking 50 years ago, half a century ago. And I often wonder to myself, when my grandparents and parents, I remember them saying, oh, times have changed so much, and, talking about their youth. And you would sit there as a kid or a young person and go, couldn't have changed that much. Well, yes, it does. In 50 years, the world is in some cases, is almost unrecognizable. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I learned and what it was like and how it was to be in a very large family. My aunt had a very, very large garden, like huge. It took more than one person to take care of that garden. And it had everything in it. My aunt is now 100 years old. And I will never forget her voice when she would yell from inside of the house, kids, stay out of that garden. And how we would be told as children by our parents not to go in your auntie's garden. Every year, that garden was like a little manufacturing facility. And the women, mostly, and a few of the men would help with the canning. And we didn't do it in the house. It was in an outdoor house or an outdoor kitchen. Because when it got to the point where things were going to be harvested, the heat would be summertime, hot, end of summer, and those the heat would be, those stoves would be going day in and day out. So you couldn't do it inside the house because it would heat up the bedrooms so badly, upstairs and whatnot, that you couldn't sleep at night. So how it was done is there was an outside kitchen where everybody cooked, and that's where the canning went. And every year there was always one cow and one pig that would be slaughtered. Now, I remember my grandmother knowing how to can meat. And from watching her, I know how to can a cow. And then when I was on reserve, I was taught how to use the bone, the marrow, the hide, as well as the meat. And it's the same process as when you're a little boy and your dad's a mechanic and you follow him around and you watch him work on cars, or you pick that shit up. And of course, girls do off their grandmothers and off their mothers pick that shit up. Now I've sat there with my grandmother and helped her do it, but I've never done one on my own. One of the things for my daughter's wedding that I'm having at the table is smoked fish. And I'm not talking done in a smoker with carcinogenics. I'm talking where a couple of guys will stay up all night watching that smokehouse to make sure that that fire, which will be the best of the best wood, slowly smokes that meat. And even on reserves, they don't do that anymore. Not very often. That's a huge treat. You know, we use smokers like everybody else does because it's easier. But we'll get fresh fish off the lake, and it'll be filleted and skinned, hung over branches, put into a smokehouse, and there will be a small fire lit below it, and it will be watched all night long until that fish is done. And that's a treat. There's nowhere you can go and buy that. You have to know how to make it. So that's one of the little extras we plan on having at my daughter's wedding. And of course, another thing we're having is one of our friends has a fish fry truck. So this thing is down at a marina. So it's not a fancy marina, just a regular old marina. And there's going to be in the parking lot a fry truck. You can order fish and chips and enjoy that if you like. If not, you can go inside the wedding venue, the marina, and you can have, your typical, I think we're going to do roast beef. So there's a lot of preparing that I've been doing, running back and forth, and it caught up with me. I went into work today and ended up coming home an hour early. because my knee is bothering me. But then when I'm at home, you're just trying very hard not to do work. You're trying hard not to clean this or do this or do that. I can remember going to the garden, being on the porch in the summertime and going to, and, us kids bugging our aunts and uncles and for ice cream, strawberries and ice cream. And it would be as simple as get the cream from the cows, get out the old ice cream maker, and it wouldn't be an electric one, it would be a hand one, and go out the garden and pick strawberries. And that's something you cannot get anymore. So things change, and not only do they change, and not only do houses disappear, landscapes change and disappear. Things we have in our lives disappear, the way we eat. Now, one of the things that gets talked about a lot at my age, when you're talking around people that are in their 50s and 60s and 70s, is how things do not taste at all like they did when we were kids. And we all agreed. I was having a conversation with a group of older women not too long ago about that. You remember when I was taking that cooking class? And we all agreed that in this country, in Canada, the taste of things really changed around COVID. It was like right after COVID, all of a sudden the grocery stores were full again and everything was going again, but nothing changed the same. It was like there was different ingredients. So that's why I try to make a lot of our stuff homemade. That's why I do canning, because at least I know what's in it. And when I open, like if you're up north, that's where most of it's kept, or even in my own kitchen. You open a jar of jam in my house, and you'll be lucky to, it'll be jam-packed with blackberries, or blueberries, or raspberries, instead of, a bunch of jelly holding a few berries together. It's what you get in the store. So yes, things change, just unbelievable. If you are young now, by the time you get to be my age, much of what you remember is just going to be a memory in your mind. And it's not, I know when you're younger, you think about it in terms of people. Well, this person's going to pass away, that person's going to pass away. But it's not just that. One of the reasons that I like to look up old towns in the States that I was in as a child or a teenager is because some of them are gone. They were in the Rust Belt. So there's this one town. It was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and it was right outside of Iron, Michigan. And out there, or Iron Mountain, Michigan. So you go to Iron Mountain, Michigan, you take a left or a right, you drive a few miles, and there was this town on the side of the mountain. And the reason I was out there is there used to be an old copper mine. And there used to be houses out there built on the side of the mountain, and a school. that I attended, that place doesn't exist anymore. My dad was up there because they needed some work done on the equipment that got the copper out of the ground. So my dad went up there with a group of other men and fixed that equipment. But that town doesn't exist anymore. I have memories being in that town that are just unbelievable. The snow used to get so deep up there, and it used to get so cold that you couldn't walk outside unless we used to have to wear those zip-up parkas where only your eyes were visible. And if you take them off or unzip them, it would be seconds before your nostrils froze together. I was out for a walk with my father one time. It was in the wintertime, and it was, snowy and very pretty. And everything was bush, like everything was pine trees and forest. And we went for this walk, and my dad looked over at me and kind of motioned to me, look over there. And he put his finger up to his mouth like, shh. And I looked over there, and there was a bobcat under a pine tree. There was this big hill back up the mountain. And I used to like to ski up there. I was always told not to go up there, but I did anyway. And I was walking along, and lo and behold, if I didn't find other structures, basements, you could tell that up at the top of that hill, at one time, there was a community up there that had long since disappeared. And the community, that little community outside Iron Mountain, is completely gone. It does not exist anymore. The only thing out there is a tourist attraction where you can see the old mining equipment. And imagine, you want to look at that. I know my dad's touched that. I've been up close to that. I've seen that. That place was so isolated that many people, they didn't have bathtubs. They had saunas. That's how they bathed. And you used brush to whack you'd put these weeds or whatever together, and you'd kind of beat yourself with them and wash your body with them. And the heat was provided by homemade wood stoves that had welded on top of them flat platforms that you would put rocks on. And it had to be a particular kind of rocks, because there are some rocks that you heat up to a certain temperature and they will explode. And you don't want that because it could kill you. So how you would bath would be, you'd go in, you'd get the fire going in the wood stove, you'd fill up a bucket of water, get your scrubbing gear and your wash rags and all that and your towels, and you'd go out to the sauna, and you would dip a ladle in the bucket, and you would put it on the rocks, and that would provide your steam. And that was your only option. Nowadays, a sauna is it's a luxury, or it's a treat. So that's sometimes why I like to watch, what's his name? Peter Santos, the guy that does those traveling channels. And there's another one I really like. What the hell's his name? Nick Johnson? Oh, he's funny. He's an American and he's a Republican. And he's a patriot, but he is funny as hell when he's traveling around. Neither one of my parents, who both grew up generational farmers, wanted to be farmers. But you got to do what you got to do. When you're in Rome, you got to do what Romans do. And they got married, and it wasn't my grandfather from my mother's side that gave them the farm. It was my grandfather from my father's side that gave them the farm. And they became dairy farmers. And they hated it. So when my father got the opportunity to work, he started out as a welder and an iron worker. And then he got his engineering degree. And at that time, in the late 60s, United States was over here in the union halls over here. So that would have been, I believe, Hamilton, Ontario. There was just thousands of jobs in the United States, people needing workers from Canada. And I'll tell you, my dad couldn't get on it fast enough. So he went over first, and then we went over second. And that's how I grew up in the United States. But anyway, I hope you all have a good night. And if you're near a thunderstorm, stay away from that lightning. You never know. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye now.